Canada's Conservative government is giving sweeping new powers to this country's spy agency. It's also providing police new tools to track and detain those who would commit terrorist acts. Prime Minister Stephen Harper says the new bill tabled today is necessary to protect Canadians.
Over the last few years, a great evil has been descending upon our world, an evil which has been growing more and more powerful, violent jihadism, motivated by extremist distortions of Islam. Its members use calculated, far-reaching violence and the threat of it to achieve their ends.
Hannah Thibodeau has been looking over the legislation. She joins me now with the details from Ottawa. Hannah, take us through the key points.
Quite a sweeping legislation that has been introduced and tabled today. First part, there's a new criminal code offense. And what this offense is someone who promotes terrorism or counsels or actively encourages others to take part in terrorism acts in Canada could receive 5 years in prison. Now, the thing that's complicated about this is really what is promoting terrorism. However, they have to go to a judge before this can actually be implemented, this criminal code offense. They would go to the person who's potentially put this up online, on a Twitter site, and they would ask them and give them the right to explain why it's not terror. If they don't believe them, if a judge doesn't believe them, then they could receive up to 5 years in prison, and that's the maximum penalty. But CSIS could also apply to have that web page or the information removed from the internet. Also, there are more powers to detain in this, and it makes it easier to detain, and it's in the wording that's very, which you have to look at. So they lowered the threshold where authorities believe a terrorist act may be carried out, and before it was written as will be carried out. Not only that, preventative detention goes from 3 to 7 days, and that's keeping someone in detention without any charges. So it's increased from 3 to 7 days when it comes to preventative detention. So that's some of the things that are included in this legislation.
Okay, the bill specifically broadens the powers for our spy agency, CSIS. What changes for them?
Absolutely. Really what it does is completely changes the mandate of Canada's spy agency, CSIS. It essentially goes from an information gathering agency to one that can disrupt a potential threat. So anything from it can cancel plane travel of someone they suspect who's going overseas to take part in ISIS or other terrorist groups. It can also block financial transactions if they believe that money is going towards terrorist acts, and then also intercept shipments of Canadian goods that they feel could be used for terrorist activities. However, they can't do this without a judicial warrant, and there's a new warrant that's now has been created, and it's called the threat disruption warrant. So think of it this way: before, they would have to go and get a warrant to listen in on phone calls. Now, this threat disruption warrant, they could go in and they could actually cut the phone call completely off. But there are concerns from some people that there are too many powers and there are too many sweeping powers in this, and it might infringe on Canadians' rights. And that question was asked of the Prime Minister at his press conference. Here's how he responded.
There's considerable oversight, but I think the premise of the question itself is wrong. And this is really what we get from our opposition, that every time we talk about security, they suggest that somehow our freedoms are threatened. We do not buy the argument that every time you protect Canadians, you somehow take away their liberties. It is a jihadi terrorist who endanger our security who would take away our freedoms.
And there were some questions in the briefing that we had earlier about how broad these new measures are. And in fact, what they were saying is that there are some measures that are reviews in this. So the first one being the judicial review. That's the big one, in particular for CSIS when it wants to go in and do this threat disruption. But also there are things like an annual review or report to the minister when it comes to the threat disruption warrant. How many times it's been used, what it's been used for, but also Parliament is going to review this. And one of the things that was asked is, are any of these measures going to be sunsetted? And that's one of the things we really expect the opposition to potentially ask for in some of these measures, is to put a sunset clause in, which means they would only last for a certain amount of years and then be reviewed.
All right, Hannah Thibodeau in Ottawa. Hannah, thank you. Already, some are questioning whether the bill tramples on Canadians' constitutional rights. Today, the opposition leader was asked what he thought of the Harper government's planned legislation.
The day after the shooting in Ottawa, I asked the Prime Minister a question. I said, when we discuss these issues going forward, can it be respectfully understanding that everybody in Canada wants the same thing? Everybody in Canada wants to make sure that we're providing the greatest safety possible, because there is a real risk in the world right now. Thousands of people have been killed by terrorist acts around the world in recent years. So we've learned that that can happen anywhere, including in Canada. And so we're going to make sure that we have the best laws possible and the best services possible to enforce them.